2021 during the
Good evening, YouTube. It is me, Mrs. Dave the lawyer. And yesterday we streamed a hearing about generics coming from offshore. And I didn't realize it, but we actually finished that stream last night. It wasn't very long. There was like 3 minutes left when I said goodnight, but you guys didn't miss anything. It was just Senator Scott like saying goodbye. So we did finish that stream last night. So I hope I don't get flagged for this stream because it is about COVID-19, and YouTube really doesn't like when you even say that name. But there's so many hearings right now about COVID-19, about, whistleblowers, cover-ups, and this one actually has to do with cancer and how COVID-19 shots are possibly linked to cancer. Now, this is something that's kind of close to my heart because I had somebody very close to me get diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer a few years ago. And I can't confirm that the COVID shot was the reason that she got diagnosed with that, but I will say that this person that I'm speaking about was probably one of the healthiest people that I know, never really got sick, didn't take any medications, but, was really adamant about taking the vax and wanted to travel. And like I said, I don't know if she has cancer because of it. I don't know if we'll ever know, but I have seen a huge influx of people getting diagnosed, young people. This person that I'm talking about was only 31 years old when she was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer. Thank the Lord that she is here. She's survived it the last 4 or 5 years. She's been in remission. It's come back. It's come back again, unfortunately, but luckily she's fighting it. But like I said, I don't know if that's the reason that she got stage 4 cancer, but all I know is just kind of weird that after the COVID-19 shots, a lot of young people started to get cancer and all kinds of other diseases. But anyways, let's hear what our senators have to say about this. Oh, and as you know, if you see me on my phone, I am in the chat chatting with you guys. So please chat along. I love to hear your feedback, and let's get started.
Really the height of COVID, and really related to all the work I was doing in terms of early treatment, and then the COVID injection injured, that type of thing. And I'm not quite sure how you got on my radar screen, but we struck up a good texting relationship. And immediately I was, Dr. Hazen made me aware of how her research, which was conducted with, supported by, guided by, overseen by the FDA, was being sabotaged. And with all the hearings and events I had done, I was trying to figure out some way of how can we hold a hearing on this, because this is really bad for science to have research sabotaged. End of last year, Dr. Hazen introduced me to Dr. El-Deiry, who probably a poster child for being tormented by, I'll call them trolls, into science. And so we put together this hearing. It's kind of predicated on Dr. El-Deiry's work that I think prompted all the attacks. That's why I'm holding this hearing. So let me get into my opening statement. I want to thank all the witnesses. I know this is a real imposition, take a lot of time and effort and expense to get here. But today's hearing is titled, Plausible Mechanisms of COVID-19 Injections Causing Cancer and Attacks on Scientific Publications and Research. Although it may seem these are two unrelated topics, discussing them together will help explain why such a large percentage of the public remains unaware of the serious adverse events caused by the COVID mRNA injections. In April, the subcommittee held a hearing and released a report exposing how top FDA officials decided to use a safety surveillance algorithm that they knew would, and in fact did, hide safety signals on extremely serious adverse events, including sudden death. This was a bombshell revelation that unfortunately was dismissed by this subcommittee's ranking member and completely ignored by the legacy media. Since 1997, when the Clinton administration made America only the second nation on earth to allow mass media advertising on pharmaceutical products, Big Pharma has spent billions on TV ads to capture the media and, as a result, the narrative. Prior to 1997, there was serious journalism covering suspected vaccine injuries. In 1997, Mike Wallace reported on CBS's 60 Minutes about swine flu vaccine injuries. By the way, they pulled the swine flu vaccine after about 25 to 30 deaths and 400 to 500 cases of Guillain-Barré disease. They pulled it. 25 to 30 deaths. We have over 39,000 deaths right now associated with the COVID injection worldwide from the VAERS vaccine, but I'll move on.
39,000
In
deaths.
1982, WRC TV's Leah Thompson reported on the findings of their more than year-long investigation into the safety and effectiveness of the pertussis component of the DPT vaccine. In 1985, Phil Donahue discussed both the swine flu and DPT vaccines and related injuries during his hour-long show. Since 1997, there have been a few reports on hepatitis B, MMR, HPV vaccine safety, but the, quote, safe and effective, unquote, mantra, combined with the narrative that adverse effects are, quote, rare and generally mild, unquote, has overwhelmed any coverage of the harms. Legacy media is not the only American institution that has been captured and controlled. Big Pharma also hires and financially awards former federal health agency officials and spends lavishly on lobbying and political donations to lawmakers of both parties. It generously funds other members of the COVID cartel, social media, medical associations like the American Medical Association and the American Association of Pediatricians, international health organizations, medical colleges, and medical journals. The testimony in today's hearing raises the question of whether Big Pharma might also be funding individuals who troll scientific research that runs counter to its goals and narratives. It should come as no surprise, therefore, that during the pandemic, treatment alternatives using cheap and safe generic drugs were not only suppressed, but actively sabotaged in favor of reliability-free and highly profitable experimental gene therapy, and that's what it is. The fact that all the institutions that benefit from Big Pharma's largesse actively push the experimental gene therapy is also the reason they are now working so hard to suppress the reality of COVID mRNA injection injuries. Testimony given in April's hearing detailed the safety studies that were not done on the COVID injections prior to their emergency use authorization and eventual full approval. This list of omitted studies should shock everyone. Again, these were just in testimony. Drug-drug interactions, cardiovascular toxicity, central nervous system toxicity, other organ toxicity, blood toxicity, genotoxicity, and carcinogenicity. Those studies weren't conducted. I'm not sure they've been conducted even today. Because it's approved, now we just don't want to know. Although legacy media, federal health officials, and the medical establishment continue to ignore and hide the lies told and the harms done by governments in response to the coronavirus, alternate media has been spreading the truth to a growing percentage of the global public. As a result, trust in these institutions is eroding. The only way to rebuild that lost trust is for the truth to be acknowledged in a process of public reckoning. The hearings I've been holding are intended to contribute to that reckoning. Today we'll hear from highly credentialed and experienced doctors and medical researchers who will discuss the plausible mechanisms of COVID mRNA injection harms. They will also describe the attacks they are experiencing on their research and reputations because they have the courage to expose the truth. I want to sincerely thank the witnesses for their courage and the time and effort they put in their testimony and advocacy. Let me just add on this note. In a couple of my public hearings, I conclude with the statement that I am truly amazed at the knowledge that mankind has accumulated over the millennia. I mean, it is amazing what we know and how rapidly we're gaining that knowledge. But in spite of that, I would argue that what we don't know vastly, and I mean vastly, exceeds what we do. And so in any kind of discussion like this, in any kind of scientific research, I think people involved need to approach these problems with that level of modesty and that kind of humility. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ranking Member Blumenthal.
All right, guys, so let's unpack this together. So today is June, 22nd, 23rd, 21st? I don't know. It's June 2026. And the COVID lockdown started. And if you said that it came from the Wuhan lab, you were racist or whatever, even though that turned out to be true. But anyways, so in the spring of that was proven that wasn't true. And then a few months later, they told us, okay, if you're sick of staying at home and you want to be able to live again, go out to dinner, go to work, get your hair done, you need to take this vaccine. We just came out with it. We don't really know what's in it or the side effects, but this is an emergency and we need to get this vaccine to everybody and their mother, especially people that are old or sick. They have to get that vaccine or, they're going to die. And even though you're healthy and you're not scared about COVID, you need to get the vaccine too, because if you don't get it, then everybody around you is going to die. And then people started getting mandates that they were going to lose their job, lose their livelihood if they didn't get this experimental research vaccine or whatever. And anybody that gave any pushback was called a conspiracy theorist, was told that they were terrible, evil, that they didn't care about anybody else, that they wanted other people around them to die because they weren't going to inject God knows what into their body. I think the statistics showed only 15% of the population did not receive the jab. That's it. And if you guys remember, there was so much propaganda promoting this shot, like unbelievable amounts. And you had all these celebrities coming out and going on camera and, getting the injection on camera and telling you you're such a wonderful human being if you get the vaccine. And, people were like lining up to get it. People got in trouble for like cutting the head of the line or like getting like bootleg vaccines. It was a crazy time to be alive. But that 15% of the population that did not want to get the shot, they were called conspiracy theorists. They were shamed and persecuted. And if you came out online and talked about how you felt and that you were concerned that we don't know what's in this, we don't know what the side effects are, you were banned. You were kicked off of social media. You were fired in some situations. Your family and friends just shunned you. You were really treated like a horrible person if you said anything negative about the shot. So I just want everybody to remember that that's what happened in 2020, because it was a crazy, crazy time to be alive. And now we're finding out, and we'll hear in this hearing, what some of the side effects really are for people that got the shot. Now, he just said a number. I believe it was around 36 or 39,000 deaths. That's just deaths from people just getting the shot. That shot just killed 39,000 people that we know of. But what I want to know is the real statistic of what other side effects were caused by the shot. That's what I really want to know. But I don't think we'll ever really find out that true number. But I'm really interested to continue and hear the rest of this hearing. Now, this hearing is over 3 hours, so we're not going to finish it tonight. We'll start it tonight for about an hour, 90 minutes, and then tomorrow we'll pick it up again. But anyways, I'll see you guys in the chat. Let's keep on going.
Thank you, Chairman Johnson. I'd like to begin my remarks by reminding everybody watching today that the National Cancer Institute has concluded, quote, "There is no evidence that COVID-19 vaccines cause cancer, lead to recurrence, or lead to disease progression." That is the National Cancer Institute. Quote, "There is no evidence that COVID-19 vaccines cause cancer, lead to recurrence, or lead to disease progression." End quote. I could conclude there, but I think that this hearing really merits a fuller explanation of what is at stake here, because we need more research into finding cancer cures and more research into preventing cancer in the first place. Cancer causes fear for everyone, and almost everyone, I venture to say, in fact, everyone has been touched by cancer in some way, and so that fear is pervasive. We can't allow that fear to cause unfounded attacks on the COVID vaccines or any other vaccine.
Oh my God, am I hearing this correctly? Am I hearing this correctly? Oh, we can't let that fear get in the way of taking your vaccines. These people are unhinged. Maybe I sound unhinged making fun of him like that, but like, think about that rationale. There's something not right.
These vaccines have saved millions of lives.
But have they? Where are the statistics on that? I think a lot of us during the lockdowns, I, for one, had a lot of free time on my hands, and I started looking into all this medical stuff. And I really started researching on just in general about vaccines. And to be honest with you guys, I was for them before the lockdowns. I was under the school of thought that children needed them when they were young, and they prevented all these plague-like diseases, and I listened to what the pediatrician told us. Now, with that in mind, my kids had some bad reactions to some of the vaccines in general, and I tried to work with my doctors and split up so the kids weren't getting 7 vaccines in one shot. But this caused a lot of issues for me and my family, because when I had moved to a different town, I was unable to get an appointment with any pediatrician's office because my kid did not, or was not up to date 100% on their vaccine schedule. And I would have these conversations with the front desk saying, "Oh, okay, well, yeah, that's why I want to come in. I want to get him up to date. Can I please have an appointment? I'll come in and get my kid up to date." "No, I'm sorry. We can't see your child because he's not up to date exactly on his vaccines." Not that I, at the time, wasn't for them. I was willing to comply, but because he didn't have them all at the exact time that they dictate he should, I could not get to see any pediatrician in the new town that I moved to. I ended up having to go to the Department of Health, and they let me pick and choose what vaccines the kids could get when. But since then, though, since the lockdown, since I delved deep into researching these vaccines, now I'm like pretty much anti-vax. We don't know what is in these vaccines, and we really don't know if they prevent any diseases. If you have never researched polio, research the polio vaccine. Just do a little bit of research on the polio vaccine, and we can chat next time about it. But that's very interesting research to do, and you'll understand what I'm talking about.
And we should all be rooting for similar feats of science to help people who are stricken with cancer or help to prevent it. Cancer data is very closely tracked in the United States, and the idea that a rollout of COVID-19 vaccines has precipitated a surge in cancer is simply not.
And on this episode of Gaslight Maxing, we're going to tell you that even though there has been a huge diagnosis and outbreak of cancer that happened the very same time that all these young people were getting the COVID vaccines, but that has nothing to do with them getting cancer. It could not mean that the COVID vaccine could give them cancer. It's not correlated. You know, just close your eyes and stop listening and just forget the fact that the exact timing of when people got the COVID vaccine is also the exact timing that we see this huge influx of young people getting cancer. But trust the science. Trust the science that they're not related. Vaccines are good. Keep getting them. Listen to your doctor. Take them exactly when your doctor tells you to, because they don't get their vaccine bonuses unless everybody's on schedule.
Supported. Nor do the vaccines make cancer grow faster. According to the American Cancer Society, most cancer doctors recommended vaccination against COVID-19 for the cancer patients they are treating. Unfortunately, messages about the safety and effectiveness of vaccination are increasingly deluged by myths and misinformation. Immunization rates are declining across the country. Diseases like measles are surging. And tragically also, vaccines have been proven to prevent certain types of cancer. Those vaccines are facing groundless attacks from top public health officials, maybe not surprisingly, because HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy initially declined to surrender his financial stake in litigation against the maker of HPV vaccines, and then only under pressure from Congress turned his interest over to his son. There's ample evidence, in fact, that HPV vaccines help prevent cervical cancer, a disease that is projected to kill 4,200 Americans this year, and I'm grateful that we have Tamika Felder, a cervical cancer survivor, here with us today. I really thank her for being here. You're doing us a great service. It's stories like yours, Ms. Felder, that remind us of the human impact of science's great successes. And I'm also grateful to have Dr. Julie Gralow, the Chief Medical Officer of the American Society of Clinical Oncology, who's here to remind us about the absence of credible scientific evidence linking COVID-19 vaccines to cancer and the safety of these vaccines for people undergoing cancer treatment. Very important, and thank you, Dr. Gralow. As just one example of the overwhelming evidence of the safety of these vaccines, I would like to submit for the record a study from the Journal of the American Medical Association involving nearly 30 million people, and finding that 4 years after vaccination, people who received an mRNA COVID-19 vaccine were less likely to die from cancer than those who were not vaccinated. I ask that it be entered the record if there's no objection, Mr. Chairman.
No objection. I wonder if that's as good as the Commonwealth Fund study you entered in previous hearing, but no objection.
Thank you. It's unfortunate that we need Dr. Gralow to appear before a hearing like this one when there are much more pressing threats to cancer patients and cancer research coming from Trump administration policies. And that's the big issue here. And the reason that I am expanding on what I said earlier, because the administration has put up needless roadblocks that have slowed the flow of grants to cancer researchers. Halts to funding imposed early last year caused the American Association of Cancer Institutes to warn that the Trump administration policies were, quote, slowing progress against cancer. And the Trump administration's obvious animus toward mRNA technology that was used for COVID-19 vaccines threatens some of the most promising research for targeted cancer treatments. The study's canceled.
You know, it's kind of BS that they're going to blame Trump for this. Because if you guys remember, Trump was like very gung-ho, Project Warp Speed, to get this to the public and, get people vaccinated that wanted to get vaccinated. He was all on board. But we see all of these side effects now 6 years later, and all of these reports and whistleblowers are coming forward. And of course, he's going to do something about it. I'm sure, I don't know if he regrets promoting it at the time. I think he did the best he could at the time. 2020 was an unprecedented situation. But what's our president supposed to do? Oh, no, let's just keep on funding you guys. Even though, you pushed something that's, giving all these people, turbo cancer, we're going to keep your funding. Well, actually, we'll just give you more. That's probably what Biden would have done, but Trump's not going to do that. It's just so ridiculous that they're always blaming him for something.
The patients excluded from trials, the treatments abandoned, decisions made today about cancer research will impact us and our children for decades to come. Just days ago, scientists announced amazing results from the study of a new drug for prostate cancer, one of the hardest cancers to treat. These results were possible in part because of work done many years ago at the National Cancer Institute. One scientist who helped with that research said, quote, "This kind of basic research is being greatly threatened by current government policies." Basic research is essential. It's not just COVID vaccines, it's not just cancer vaccines, it's all kinds of medical treatment that you will find in hospitals today, saving lives, beginning with basic research that is being throttled by this administration. And so I hope we can all agree that advancing cures for cancer and stopping the forces that undermine them ought to be a top priority.
So I have an idea. If we really want to eradicate cancer, why don't we stop Big Pharma from buying up companies that actually have found cures for cancer and then suppressing them? Maybe that could stop cancer. Or instead of, I think RFK came out last year about this. Instead of, donating more money in October for, cancer research, why don't these companies like Big Food and Big Sugar that are asking for donations to help, fund cancer research, why don't they just stop putting chemicals in their food that give us cancer? These things just make sense to me. And that's just not the playbook for the left or for Big Pharma or any of these big corporations, because they thrive on chaos. They thrive on illness and sickness, and they want you not dead, just barely hanging on. So you're taking your 10, 15, 20 pills, or your multi-million-dollar cancer drugs. And they like it when it comes back. They want you to live. Even better if it comes back, because now you're hooked for life on their, 7-figure a year Cancer drugs. No thanks.
For all of us in Congress, it ought to be a bipartisan cause. I hope my colleagues will take up the mantle with me. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Senator Blumenthal. It is the tradition of this subcommittee to swear in witnesses, so if you all rise and raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you will give before the subcommittee will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Please be seated. Our first witness is Dr. Angus Dalgleish. Dr. Dalgleish is Professor Emeritus of Oncology at City St. George's University of London, where he has pioneered the immunotherapy of cancer. He is known for his work on HIV and cancer and received the Joshua Lederberg Prize in 2011 for his work developing cancer treatments. He has been the principal of the Institute of Cancer Vaccines and Immunotherapy since 2000 and a consultant in general medicine, immunology, virology, and oncology since 1986. And by the way, these are very abbreviated biographies. I mean, each one of these individuals on both sides have much larger biographies that you should take a look at, but I force them to abbreviate it. Dr. Dalgleish.
Thank you very much for asking me to give evidence on this. I'd just like to point out that I have done, as you say, I've been in cancer immunotherapy. I've been in cancer immunotherapy for over 3 decades, and I have made big advances in the treatment of cancer with immunotherapy. So this sets the scene that I became aware in early 22 of my patients who'd been stable for years, do mainly melanoma patients. They'd had several different types of immunotherapy. And in 6 weeks, I saw 6 patients relapse with melanoma. They'd been stable for 3 to 18 years. They felt well apart from the relapse. And being investigative, I asked, what was the thing that was common? And the thing that was common is they'd all received a booster vaccine from their general practitioners. Now, I know that these cancers are totally controlled by the T-cell response, so I immediately suspected the T-cell response was being perturbated by the cancer. And initial investigations showed that this was likely to be true. However, there was then a paper published by some doctors in Madrid, which, and I quote, the paper is called "The Evidence of Exhausted Lymphocytes After the Third Anti-SARS-CoV-2 Vaccine Dose in Cancer Patients." I mean, this was absolutely staggering that they showed across hundreds of patients that you get this T-cell suppression. Hard on the heels of this were then numerous reports that following the booster vaccine, we were getting IgG immunoglobulin switching, so you converted the immune system from being aggressive, fighting invaders, to one of tolerization. So therefore, the immune system was tolerating the cancer, and this was the reason that we were starting to see it. However, it is important at this stage to say that we were getting reports after I first reported this of other cancers. And my initial observation that this was all due to T-cell suppression started to fade into the perspective that other actors were at work with the vaccine, as it were. Colorectal cancer was being reported by my patients, by my fellow surgeons, as presenting late, stage 4, not stage 1 or 2, and early in patients in their 20s and 30s and 40s in a way that we have not seen before. And then in my own practice, as I was looking for patients who had other cancers, I noticed that they too had booster vaccines, and I list them in my report. They go from everything from the common cancers, from breast, prostate, etc., and all the way through to some really unexpected ones, including glioma, and more recently, hematological malignancies. Now, looking at the literature as to why this could be, and I'm involved in two big publications. One's been accepted prior to changes, and this shows that there are remarkable at least a dozen mechanisms where messenger RNA can insert into the DNA and activate oncogenes, and more importantly, and especially the long term, they can suppress the suppressor networks, which means if a cancer is starting to evolve, it would normally be maintained, controlled, and this mechanism is being prevented. And the number of people who've shown this is quite enormous. So as an oncologist, who I'm starting to see that it's not only my patients now, it's people I know really well who are going down with cancer, and they're going down more aggressively, and the treatment is not working nearly as well. And I'm used to people saying, oh, there's no evidence that the cancer's increasing and that there's anything to do with the vaccine. But I can assure you from the patients that I have seen that many have seen a dozen doctors before. Not one of them has ever asked the vaccine history. So, of course, they see no evidence. And my full detailed research into the messenger RNA vaccines, and I was on the scientific board of a company claimed to be the messenger RNA vaccine company for 5 years and left 8 years ago. So I know a lot more than the average clinician. And myself and others feel that there is no way you can control this technology, and its use for future vaccines should be banned, and the COVID ones stopped now.
You know who does ask the question, have you had those vaccines and have you had the boosters? Your life insurance company. So when you apply for life insurance, that is one of the questions they ask. And they started asking it during the lockdowns. They were asking specifically, have you had COVID? And they would not, certain companies would not write you a policy if you had had COVID. I believe it was like within 30 days or something. Like you needed to be postponed until, you know, I think maybe 60 or 90 days clear of COVID-19 symptoms. But so at the time, and I know this because, and I shared with you guys, I have a insurance agency, and you know, business was really good during COVID lockdowns. Everybody wanted life insurance, but what I noticed from an underwriting perspective is that at the time they wanted to know, you know, had these people had COVID before? But then when the vaccines started to get distributed, they wanted to know if you had the vax, if you've ever had COVID, and if you've had the booster shots. But let me just say, if you didn't have them, you're probably going to get a much better rating when you go to buy life insurance. Your likelihood of longevity goes way up if you've never had any of those shots or boosters.
Thank you, Dr. Dalgleish. Dalgleish, and you stayed right on time. Appreciate that. Next witness is Dr. Wafik El-Deiry. Dr. El-Deiry is a practicing physician scientist, American Cancer Society professor, founding director of the Cancer Center at Brown University, and chair of the Worldwide Innovative Network Consortium in Precision Oncology. He discovered a tumor suppressant gene he named WAF1, and a first-of-its-kind drug approved by FDA last year for the treatment of an aggressive brain cancer. Dr. El-Deiry.
Thank you, Senator Johnson and Senator Blumenthal and distinguished committee members for the opportunity. Thank you, Senator Johnson, Senator Blumenthal, and distinguished committee members for the opportunity to speak at this important hearing. I am a physician scientist and cancer researcher with more than 30 years of experience studying how our body normally fights cancer through a major tumor suppressor called P53, and finding new ways of treating it. I've also advocated on Capitol Hill since 2005 for support of research funding, which is really vital. My work has focused on how cancers develop when these normal tumor suppressor mechanisms fail, including discoveries involving how tumor suppressors work, and this has become foundational in cancer biology and oncology research. I've also studied how viruses and other biological processes can disrupt our defenses against cancer. So when the COVID pandemic began, I wanted to help by applying our expertise in cancer biology, immunology, and approved treatments to better understand and treat COVID. It's been long understood that certain viruses contribute to cancer development by disrupting tumor suppressor pathways, including p53, one of the body's most important cancer protective mechanisms. Early in the pandemic, I became concerned that the COVID virus might similarly interfere with these defense mechanisms, making this an important area for scientific investigation. Early in the pandemic, I also expressed uncertainty on social media about the natural origin of the COVID virus. And this is when I first started to experience repercussions of speaking out against the mainstream narrative. What I didn't expect were the attacks on science itself. By July 2020, my laboratory published findings showing that a class of cancer drugs known as MEK inhibitors suppressed ACE2, the cell surface receptor the COVID virus uses to infect human cells. By April of 24, we reported findings suggesting that the spike protein associated with COVID infection or COVID vaccination could reduce the ability of p53 to activate genes involved in suppressing cancer. Based on these findings, we emphasize that effective vaccines against viruses such as COVID should strengthen immunity against infection without interfering with the body's natural defenses against cancer. These concerns were raised through normal scientific channels, yet the response was not open scientific engagement, but escalating attacks. Instead of contributing to scientific dialogue, the findings triggered attacks on both the research and the researchers involved. Much of this occurred through an online platform known as PubPeer, originally created about a decade ago to identify fraud and scientific misconduct. Unfortunately, the platform increasingly became weaponized against researchers whose findings challenged prevailing narratives. The platform permits anonymous accusations without meaningful accountability. There's no disclosure of conflicts of interest, no statute of limitations, or citizenship requirements. These attacks are public, amplified through social media, and can continue indefinitely regardless of whether wrongdoing is ever established. This is precisely what happened to us. Although we corrected minor errors where appropriate and continue to do so, none altered the underlying results or conclusions of our work. Nevertheless, our publications became subject of sustained public attacks that damage reputation and undermine scientific credibility. Despite these ongoing attacks, last summer I agreed to serve on an HHS committee on immunization practices working group on COVID immunizations, and as an expert, I therefore looked into everything we know about cancer and COVID infection and COVID vaccination, and by the fall found nearly 70 papers describing more than 300 reported cancer cases from 27 countries following one or more COVID mRNA vaccine injections. The reported cancers occurred near injection sites like sarcomas or lymphomas, right at the injection site, within the head and neck region, within and elsewhere, including, as Dr. Dalgleish mentioned, brain tumors and other tumors. In some reported cases, spike protein was identified within tumor tissue. Our findings were published in January of this year, and shortly afterwards, I was contacted directly by former Japanese Minister Kazuhiro Haraguchi, who reported developing a diffuse large B-cell lymphoma that later metastasized to his tonsil, and biopsied, and they found spike protein. There should be no spike in tumors. These observations warrant serious scientific investigation, and as such, a number of unexpected observations have been made with the COVID mRNA vaccines that suggest potentially plausible mechanisms and connections to cancer. The attacks on my publications intensified and continue to the present day, despite no findings of fraud, misconduct, or wrongdoing after years of investigation. I am for vaccines that are safe and effective. Both our paper and the journal itself became targets of attacks through PubPeer and related online campaigns. I remain, in effect, guilty until proven innocent. Patients deserve informed consent. Scientists deserve the freedom to investigate legitimate scientific concerns. There are many open questions, including who is at greatest risk from these vaccines, and there shouldn't be fear of reputational destruction, institutional retaliation, or professional ruin. PubPeer needs to be held accountable for making false accusations against physicians and scientists that destroy reputations and careers. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. El-Deiry. Our next witness is Dr. Saskia Mostert. Dr. Mostert studied medicine at VU Amsterdam in the Netherlands and conducted a PhD program on compliance and childhood leukemia treatment in Indonesia. She then worked as a research coordinator of global health and pediatric oncology research programs at Amsterdam University Medical Center and Princess Maxima Center. Her fields of expertise include treatment compliance, the problem of corruption in medicine, and hospital detention practices. Dr. Mostert.
Dear members of the American Senate, in 2024, our team published a study in BMJ Public Health examining all-cause mortality data across Western countries between 2020 and 22. These were government-reported mortality records routinely used throughout mainstream public health. The peer review process had taken more than 9 months. Our study showed that excess mortality remained elevated across 47 Western countries, totaling more than 3 million excess deaths. Excess mortality persisted across the overwhelming majority of countries studied after the acute phase of the pandemic. We did not claim certainty regarding the causes of excess mortality. Rather, we asked attention for 3 major events that were non-existent before the pandemic: the COVID infection, the containment measures, and the COVID vaccines. In addition, we acknowledged other overlooked factors. We urged governments and public health leaders to investigate the underlying causes and evaluate their policies. During the pandemic, extraordinary measures were justified in the name of protecting human life. Public officials and media emphasized that every COVID death mattered and every life deserved protection. I believed the discovery of more than 3 million excess deaths would prompt the same urgency in investigating their causes. Instead, what followed often resembled what I could only describe as blind fury. What could explain this massive outrage? During the pandemic, health policies were combined with psychological tactics to influence public behavior. Governments and media implemented psychological manipulation and fear propaganda without our awareness or consent that increases conformity and reduces tolerance for reason and dissenting voices, such as tunnel vision, emotional messaging, polarization, and important, the distinction between worthy versus unworthy victims. So distinguishing between important victims who deserve extensive attention or support and other victims who can be ignored. Censorship and suppression tactics have been used against doctors and scientists questioning the official COVID narrative. I will mention a few. The devaluation.
Do you guys remember all the physicians that were persecuted online back in 2020 when they just wanted to share their opinion about what they thought about the disease and alternative medicine, and what they thought could happen to try to help warn people if they did take the shot? And they were completely demonized and their accounts were, some of them were shut down. They were shadow banned and banned. Some of them lost their jobs. And the media just acted like these were horrible people, that they were stupid idiots. How could they go against this narrative? And I feel like the left wants us to forget that. They want us to forget the hell that people went through if they went against this narrative. And I think some people kind of push it aside. And I'm not saying that people forgot. I think it's hard to forget. We want to forget. A lot of us want to forget 2020 lockdowns. It was a crazy time. But I don't think we're ever going to get an apology. I don't think those physicians are ever going to get an apology. Like some people, their lives were ruined because they just went against the narrative, and they weren't doing it maliciously. They were genuinely concerned with public welfare. They had major concerns that the instructions that were given to us were not going to work out the way that they were telling us they were going to work out. And these people were brave enough to, share their wisdom and warn us or give us alternatives instead of having to take an experimental shot. And they literally were treated like they were like the most evil people on earth, or stupid. They're stupid, going against science. But I think a lot of us that are smart realize that those people were right. And I think the people that decided not to take the shot knew that those people were right all along. But if we spoke up and we said that, we were literally called a conspiracy theorist.
Tactics: discrediting critics and criticism using labeling such as misinformation. Cover-up tactics: hiding censorship using proxies, fact-checkers, shadow banning, and deplatforming. Reinterpretation tactics: favorably framing censorship as protection of the public or follow the science. Official channel tactics, which gives the censorship the appearance of legitimacy of justice and hides political or economic conflicts of interest. And last but not least, the intimidation tactics, using fear, threats, coercion to silence critics and others. Encountered blind and irrational fury after our publication can thus be explained by tunnel vision disruption. Not only the worthy victims, the COVID patients, but also the unworthy victims, the lockdown victims, and the vaccine injured were described. Polarization in society between those who followed the official COVID narrative and those who questioned it became visible. Despite a supportive statement from Reuters, media outlets used their devaluation tactics and labeled the publication as anti-vax, conspiracy theory, and misinformation. One affiliated...
Misinformation. Is that word not like a trigger word for some of you guys out there? Misinformation. It's kind of triggering because people were merely speaking the truth or just using discernment, or in some cases just common sense. Maybe you should get some sunshine, some vitamin D, and take some vitamin C. It's like common sense, right? But that wasn't the narrative. The narrative was you have to stay indoors, wear a diaper on your face, and that's the only way. Oh, and get this experimental whatever, cancer, whatever. That's the only way you're gonna survive. But don't do anything that our ancestors did. Don't get any sun. That could kill you.
Hospital publicly distanced itself from the study and announced a scientific integrity investigation. Institutional responses are increasingly used as official channel tactics to discredit, intimidate, isolate, and silence those raising unwelcome scientific questions. I resigned. Scientific integrity investigations can be evaluated according to confidentiality, transparency, presumption of innocence, and fairness principles. To my opinion, all these principles have been trampled on. The institutional confidential report about my co-authors was leaked to a national newspaper and resulted in a hit piece. This example speaks volumes. To be clear, I lost my position after publishing official government mortality data and calling for further scientific investigation into persistent excess deaths. Science cannot function when legitimate questions become professionally dangerous to ask. When scientists fear professional destruction, the public loses access to honest scientific inquiry. The Institute concluded that scientific integrity was not violated in our study. No plagiarism, fabrication, or falsification took place. Nevertheless, the Institute persists on retraction of the paper for containing misinformation about possible causes of excess mortality. Ironically, the text on containment measures and vaccines was much shorter in the original version of the paper. The reviewers selected by the journal had asked us to either delete the text or provide more evidence. As there is evidence available, we included it. All added references concerned peer-reviewed publications from well-known institutes indexed on PubMed. My proposed post-publication revision that included a section on vaccine effectiveness in reducing mortality was ignored by the journal. Right from the start, it was an unequal battle. Our call for investigation of underlying causes had to be censored and erased one way or another. The tunnel vision leaves no room for unworthy victims. Yet the persistent excess mortality remains unexplained. Our case is not isolated. Books have documented the suppression of more than 80 Dutch doctors and scientists, as well as the removal of 60 professors across Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. In recent years, the number of removals for ideological insubordination has increased significantly. Similar patterns emerge across institutions. After a media scandal, the university distances itself and starts disciplinary proceedings. The reason given for dismissal is scientific integrity violation, whereas the real reason appears to be dissent. Recently, we established a task force on academic freedom in the Netherlands to investigate censorship, suppression, and systematic attacks on doctors and scientists, questioning aspects of the official COVID narrative. Censorship undermines academic freedom by discouraging legitimate scientific inquiry. It narrows the range of perspectives permitted within public debate and stimulates self-censorship among academics. Subsequent false scientific consensus can lead to dysfunctional policies. If we want to restore public trust, we must once again protect academic freedom and the right of scientists and doctors to question prevailing assumptions without fear of professional destruction. It is time to return to Voltaire's Enlightenment commitment to academic freedom. I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to death your right to say it.
Thank you, Dr. Mostert.
So some people watching may be thinking, like, why are we talking about this now? COVID happened in 2020. We're in 2026. We're already halfway through 2026. Why are we still talking about it? Like, let's just move on. And I get that. I'm sure a lot of people never want to relive 2020. It was a very strange time for the world. And a lot of people did not have a good experience in 2020. But the reason that it is important that we continue talking about it and uncovering these things, and especially here in America, it's so important that we continue to talk about this and really get to the bottom of everything. Because America is known for our rights. And what's one of the best rights we have as Americans? Freedom of speech. Freedom of speech is what makes America America. It's one of the things that makes America like the greatest country out there. But if you guys remember, in 2020, our freedom of speech was not practiced the way and not enforced the way that it really should have been. People were being penalized for speaking the truth, first of all. They're speaking the truth, and you should always be able to speak the truth. But it went against this narrative, and there was a very clear message that seems like most governments around the world wanted everybody to see, and they worked together with social media companies, and they tried to suppress our freedom of speech if it went against this narrative. And they could have gotten away with it fully, and they almost did. But we did have a small percentage of people here in America, and actually globally, but again, it's very important here in America because we have that First Amendment right of freedom of speech. We have to stand up for freedom of speech. Because if we are unable, if it's illegal for us to speak the truth or even speak things that are not true, it's our right as Americans. We can say things that are true or not true. It's legal here in America. It's not in other countries. But we have to protect that right. That is one of the most important rights, and it's something that should not be taken for granted. Because when you are silenced and you don't have the ability to point out injustices or point out things that are not right, where does that leave you? Where does that leave the world? I don't think you guys would like to live in that type of world. And that's supposed to be like a huge, like, cornerstone of America. We didn't want to be oppressed. We left England because we wanted the freedom to say how we felt, to, criticize a king or a leader. We wanted to practice, the religion that we see fit. That's why America began. And we're about to celebrate our 250th birthday on July 4th. So that's why we need to continue having these conversations. And us as a community here on YouTube, we need to continue to get the word out, and we need to continue to fight and save our freedom of speech. And we're going to talk more about that too, getting closer to 4th of July. I got some special stuff for you guys, but let's continue with this.
Next we'll go to Dr. Sabine Hazen. Dr. Hazen received her MD in Canada and completed residency at the University of Miami. She was the first woman gastroenterology fellow at the University of Florida and became an expert in the microbiome. She is currently the CEO of a private gastroenterology clinic and a clinical trial drug development company, as well as Progenobiome LLC, a genetic research lab that studies the clinical implications of the microbiome. Dr. Hazen.
All right, I'm Dr. Sabine Hazen, a research gastroenterologist. For more than 3 decades, I've done hundreds of clinical trials for leading pharmaceutical companies. My work has contributed to bringing biologics, antibiotics, and vaccines to market. While these advances have helped patients, they have also revealed critical gaps in our understanding of human health, particularly the gut microbiome. The microbiome, your bacteria in your gut, is your immunity. In 2019, I founded Progenobiome, which is a research laboratory. And I say research because the microbiome research is at its infancy, and it's not going to be of my lifetime. My goal was simple: to rigorously study the microbiome in real-world clinical settings. My team and I launched 61 clinical trials to actively understand the gut connection in various diseases: Alzheimer's, autism, Parkinson's, cancer. This is precision medicine, taking care to each patient's unique microbiome signature. Because yes, in the microbiome space, we're all different. And if we're all different, there is no normal in the microbiome space. So in 2020, I found myself in a very interesting position. I was taking care of high-profile individuals in Malibu. I had a portal with the FDA that could write protocols and submit protocols to the FDA. And I had a research lab that could look at the microbiome. So this unique position, I felt I was the best person to be looking at the microbiome and looking at COVID. While exchanging information with scientists at NIST, the National Institute of Standards, who were looking at COVID in septic tanks, and by the way, for those of you who don't know National Institute of Standards, they overlook DARPA, FDA, CDC. So with discussions, Progenobiome became the first lab worldwide to document whole genome sequencing of COVID virus in clinical patient feces. Our paper was published in Gut Pathogens in 2021 after a 6-month peer review, only to be retracted in May 2025 without any valid scientific justification or even notifying the peer reviewers that approved the paper to begin with. I have to point out again that this was a landmark paper that showed COVID in the stools of clinical patients, not septic tanks, but clinical patients. While we were looking at stools, we discovered that hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin reduced the viral presence of COVID. In other words, COVID disappeared on these. However, those drugs also killed the microbiome. And that was the important finding during the pandemic, that everybody's different and everybody needs a different treatment. It is also important to note that during the pandemic, I treated under FDA oversight. I actually wrote 3 protocols on hydroxychloroquine versus placebo and ivermectin doxycycline versus placebo. And during my whole time that the FDA was watching, we lost no one. No one died on my shift. And by the way, I've treated thousands of patients. Doesn't the public want to know, how did I treat? What criteria did I use to divide the treatment in patients? We conducted a review of these patients treated and noticed actually that ivermectin-based multi-drug therapy helped severely hypoxic patients. This data was published in 2022 after 8 months of peer-reviewed scrutiny and then retracted in March 2025. We also published cardiac safety data from our phase 2 trial using hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin. You will remember during the pandemic that there was a concern about cardiac problem from hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin. My team risked their lives putting Holter monitors on people's hearts to monitor and capture the QT prolongation, and there were no QT prolongation. We published this data in December 2024. The paper was retracted in 2025, February. These retractions consistently challenged the feasibility of early treatment. Remember, if there was a treatment, vaccines would not have passed. Our most significant discovery, however, was on bifidobacteria. What is bifidobacteria, you ask? A bacteria that's in your probiotics. When you turn your bottle of probiotics, that's the bacteria. It's bifidobacteria. Bifidobacteria is an important microbe that helps you break down your food so that the sugar comes out and goes into the cell, into your mitochondria. Without bifidobacteria, the sugar's not going into your cell. Ask yourself, how are you going to metabolize? How are you going to have immunity if you don't have your cells working? So bifidobacteria was an extremely important finding because we discovered that severe COVID patients lacked bifidobacteria, while patients that were high risk, exposed, had a lot of bifidobacteria. We also discovered that people with autism, Alzheimer's, Crohn's disease, Lyme disease, irritable bowel syndrome, mental health, invasive cancer, lacked bifidobacteria. Bifidobacteria appears in the young at a high level and disappears as we get older. We found that vitamin C, bovine immunoglobulin, and ivermectin, a fermented product of a bacteria called Streptomyces, could help increase bifidobacteria and restore. Is that why we were seeing possibly hypoxic patients improving? I wrote a hypothesis. Perhaps ivermectin was improving the bifidobacteria. That hypothesis was published and retracted in 2023. When a hypothesis is retracted, we've lost science and medicine. We then presented data on the vaccines, and we discovered that the vaccines killed the microbiome specifically the bifidobacteria. That abstract won the Best Research Award at the American College of Gastro and reached 18,000 GI doctors, yet was never published. If you follow the disappearance of bifidobacteria in the gut, you start to understand disease. You start to see why the newborns, 1 in 12 kids in California, 12 boys in California has autism. If you look at the data that just came out that showed newborns, only 25% of newborns are born with adequate levels of bifidobacteria. So if you restore the bifidobacteria like we did in our lab in kids with autism, you will actually resume speech, which is what we showed in 2 twins where we restored the bifidobacteria. That abstract won a research award at the American College of Gastro. In fact, Progenobiome has earned 4 consecutive awards at the American College of Gastro, affirming peer recognition of our work. Yet promising observations face problems and persistent barriers when attempting to publish in. Papers pass rigorous review are retracted over minor, easily correctable issue. The main non-medical scientist that criticized my papers has patent on the microbiome. Can you say conflict of interest? So I ask Congress today, should non-physician without relevant clinical expertise review and override medical data from practicing physicians? True expertise must be challenged by qualified peers, not outsiders. Members of Congress, imagine the possibilities if scientists could publish without fear of politically motivated retractions, if we could focus on advancing knowledge instead of defending it. The American people deserve transparent, rigorous science. Protecting scientific integrity is not just about my work, but it is about securing the future of medicine for all. Because ultimately, we're all going to be patients. Thank you.
So I loved what she had to say, and if anybody has like a good bifida supplement that you'd recommend, definitely drop it in the chat. But remember the sentence that we heard over and over during the lockdowns: trust the science. They told us, don't ask questions, do what we're telling you, and just trust the science. And if you think about it, I mean, it's not comical. It is comical, but it really isn't. It's really messed up that they're telling us to trust the science, but literally going against common sense and practical science. I mean, in science, you ask questions. You do experiments. You question things. That's the whole point of science, is to learn more and test things, and that there isn't necessarily a definitive answer. There could be other options, other answers. That's the whole premise behind science and scientific data. You're always researching and trying different variables. That's what science is about. It's not necessarily definitive. And we have like so much emerging technology, especially today. Like, we're learning new things on like a hourly basis sometimes because of the upgraded technology we have. And the narrative and the propaganda that we were fed is, don't question anything, just trust the science, just trust the science. And how many people did you know that were saying these things to you? If you were somebody that didn't feel comfortable getting the vax, if you were somebody that didn't want to wear a mask, if you were somebody that wanted to go outside and get sunlight instead of like sitting in your home all day, every day, people said to you, looked you in the face and told you to trust the science and shamed you if you didn't want to wear a mask or even talked about not wearing a mask. They shamed you. You were treated like a terrible, evil person for even thinking about not wearing a mask. Trust the science. That's what they told you. Literally the exact opposite of like the sentence. it's kind of like the Affordable Care Act. You know, they call it the Affordable Care Act, but anybody that has been on the marketplace in the last few years knows that the Affordable Care Act is anything but affordable. But that's a conversation for another day.
Thank you, Dr. Hazen. I was hoping we get through all the opening statements before we had to go vote, but I've got a quick vote, so we'll put the hearing into recess, and as soon as we get back, we'll open it back up.
Let me see if I can skip ahead. Hold on one second, guys. I'm on my my walking pad, my treadmill, getting my steps in.
Multi-award-winning, internationally renowned British cardiologist. He served in an advisory role for health policy across governments, including as an ambassador to the Academy of Medical Royal Colleges and trustee of the King's Fund, a health policy think tank. He was ranked the #1 doctor in the world influencing obesity thinking, and is named one of the UK's most influential scientists. Dr. Malhotra.
Thank you, Senator Johnson. In January 2021, indoctrinated with the unlikelihood of any major harm, I took 2 doses of Pfizer's mRNA vaccine, unaware at the time that it was, in fact, a prophylactic gene therapy product and unlike any traditional vaccine. Although I was at very low risk of serious illness from COVID-19 due to my age and perfect metabolic health, I was inoculated to protect my patients. As one of the UK's most trusted doctors, I was requested to appear on Good Morning Britain to help tackle vaccine hesitancy amongst high-risk ethnic minority groups. 5 months later, a personal tragedy triggered a complete U-turn in my perception of the vaccine. We were dealing with a medical product that was actually unsafe and defective. My fit and healthy 73-year-old father, honorary vice president of the British Medical Association, who also happened to be my best friend and last surviving member of my immediate family, died after suffering an unexpected cardiac arrest. Post-mortem findings revealed severe coronary artery disease, and subsequent published mechanistic evidence suggested that 2 doses of the mRNA COVID vaccine likely caused a massive acceleration in atherosclerosis, leading to his sudden death. In 2022, I published a 2-part peer-reviewed paper in the Journal of Insulin Resistance calling for a moratorium on these unsafe and defective products. The most damning evidence was a reanalysis of Pfizer and Moderna's original trials. It determined a frequency of serious harm from the product that was 2 to 4 times more likely than being hospitalized with severe COVID. In my view, if the system had been more transparent, this prophylactic gene therapy would likely not have been injected into a single human being in the first place. Although there is now a multitude of high-quality research supporting those analyses, there's been predictable little to any mainstream media coverage, a symptom of the downstream effects of how big corporations exert their power by controlling the dominant narrative. I have personal experience with these downstream effects. Towards the end of last year, at the Reform Party political conference, I quoted Britain's most eminent oncologist, Professor Angus Dalgleish. He believes that the COVID mRNA vaccine likely played a significant role in cancers of members of the royal family. Predictably, I was smeared and misrepresented in the media. Even the British Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, misled Parliament, suggesting that I'd claimed that all vaccines cause cancer. In quotes, "These dangerous conspiracies cost lives," he said. I also experienced public smears and attacks from influential sections of the medical profession. I'm a grieving vaccine-injured doctor. I've been diagnosed with a persistent autoimmune condition related to loss of bifidobacteria in my gut, and advanced blood tests suggested I'm at slightly increased risk of cancer in the short term. Looking at the totality of up-to-date evidence and what you've heard from eminent witnesses today, in my view, millions of Americans and millions more across the world may be in clear and present danger of suffering premature cardiovascular disease and cancer. Without allowing all scientists to debate this openly, without fear of censure, we will not be able to identify who is most at risk and how these risks can be mitigated. When it comes to making money, multinational corporations have been diagnosed by preeminent forensic psychologist Dr. Robert Hare and law professor Joel Bakan as legal entities that fulfill the criteria for psychopathy. Characteristics include callous unconcern for the safety of others, incapacity to experience guilt, repeated lying, and conning others for profit. The evidence presented here today exposes the corporate tyranny underlying public health practice. This profitability over people rooted in the neoliberal economic model has led to trust being an all-time low in the medical profession. A full public apology from government bodies and medical leadership to the vaccine injured and bereaved is an essential first step in restoring that trust. Tyranny emerges when people are afraid to say what they think. When you have something to say, silence is a lie. When everyone lies all the time, the tyranny is complete. To save the health of the American people and to save democracy, it is our responsibility to expose, resist, and dismantle the era of corporate tyranny we currently find ourselves in. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Malhotra. Our next
I mean, geez, wow. I think that he definitely was saying what we've been thinking. It makes me so angry to listen to this. Because the reality is, there are still a lot of people out there that will not let go of the COVID propaganda and narrative. We can't, well, we can. We have a choice. We can do whatever we want. We can talk about this with whoever we want, and we should. But I think a lot of us don't feel comfortable talking online about these topics, don't feel comfortable at work talking about these topics. Some people may even feel uncomfortable at their own family table because, I mean, if you think about it, think about the way that people were harmed and shamed back in 2020 and 2021 for going against the narrative, for questioning and not trusting the science. I mean, people were brutalized physically, emotionally, financially for going against the narrative. And this wasn't just traumatic for those particular people. It was traumatic for all of us that were witnessing it. We saw firsthand what happened to people that were brave enough to speak out and go against the narrative. Their lives were sometimes literally ruined right in front of our eyes. But we cannot be complacent. We have to continue talking about these topics. We have to keep talking about it. This should be, Thanksgiving chats. Talk about this hearing. Talk about the fact that people that got the COVID vaccine are getting turbo cancer. People that got the COVID vaccine and the boosters are at greater risk for heart issues and a whole bunch of other issues that we haven't even heard about on this stream yet. We need to keep talking about it. We have to keep talking about it. That is our duty as free American citizens. We have to talk about it and spread the truth because so much lying was done between 2020 and now, and it's still going on. These narratives, as we heard one of the first speakers, so outraged that anybody could insinuate that the vaccine could cause cancer, even though there are studies that are proving it. It was just so offensive to him. And he used that tactic that a lot of the left use, that shaming you for even questioning or insinuating that this could happen. And I don't know if you guys know this, but the feeling and the frequency of shame is one of the lowest vibrations, lowest energies, lowest frequencies that you can be in. And this is a tactic that is used to manipulate us. But we're smarter than that, and we're going to keep talking about it. We're going to keep listening to this hearing, and let's see what else they have to say.
next witness is Dr. Julie Gralow. Dr. Gralow is Executive Vice President and Chief Medical Officer for the American Society of Clinical Oncology. She is Professor Emeritus of Medical Oncology and Global Health at the University of Washington School of Medicine and the co-founder of 2 nonprofits to support female cancer survivors and promote cancer advocacy and education in developing countries. Dr. Gralow.
Thank you, Chairman Johnson, Ranking Member Blumenthal, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to share my clinical perspective on this important topic. As you've heard, I'm the Chief Medical Officer and Executive Vice President for the Association for Clinical Oncology, or ASCO, a 501c6 organization established by the American Society of Clinical Oncology in 2019 that represents more than 50,000 oncology professionals who care for people living with cancer. ASCO works to ensure that all individuals with cancer have access to high-quality care, and we're committed to the principle that knowledge conquers cancer. Through research and education, ASCO works to conquer cancer and create a world where cancer is prevented or cured and every survivor is healthy. We appreciate the opportunities to discuss the critical role of mRNA technology in cancer care and the unwavering commitment to patient safety that guides its development. For nearly 3 decades prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, the primary driving force behind mRNA research was cancer immunotherapy. When exploring emerging therapies like mRNA vaccines, oncology professionals rely on well-designed clinical trials to establish clinical efficacy, evaluate unintended consequences, and ensure the benefits outweigh the potential risks. Currently, there is no clinical evidence proving that mRNA COVID-19 vaccines cause cancer or accelerate cancer growth. Cancer is caused by a series of gene mutations and does not develop suddenly. Rather, tumor evolution is a multi-step process that generally takes years or even decades to manifest clinically. The appearance of late-stage aggressive tumors within weeks or months of an injection is biologically incompatible with what we've learned from decades of research on the causes of cancer. In fact, RNA breaks down quickly in the body and doesn't enter a person's DNA. In other words, mRNA vaccines do not cause gene mutations. The benefits of COVID vaccination in patients with cancer are supported by a large and growing body of evidence. mRNA COVID-19 vaccines protect patients with cancer who often have compromised immune systems.
I don't believe this lady.
Increasing their risk of negative
I want to
outcomes
see the
if they
studies she's
contract
talking about
COVID-19.
and who put them out.
Before vaccines were available, researchers at the University of Wisconsin-Madison found that COVID-19 patients with the current cancer diagnosis were 24% more likely to require intensive care and 58% more likely to die in the hospital compared to after the vaccines became available. In contrast, a 2025 study led by investigators at Vanderbilt University found that cancer patients who received COVID-19 vaccinations had a 50% reduction in their risk of hospitalization. These data are reinforced by an ASCO study demonstrating a clinically significant relationship between vaccination and survival in cancer patients diagnosed with COVID-19.
I don't believe her. I want to see
mRNA
those studies for
technology
myself.
also represents a really exciting and significant clinical advancement for therapeutic cancer vaccines aimed at treating existing tumors. Unlike traditional treatments such as chemotherapy, which broadly destroys both cancerous and healthy dividing cells, mRNA technology is designed to teach an individual's body to recognize tumor markers that are unique to that patient's cancer, encouraging the patient's immune system to destroy just cancer cells, not healthy ones. While the FDA has not yet granted approval for mRNA cancer vaccine therapies, clinical trials are actively testing mRNA cancer vaccines and have reported good tolerability and promising clinical activity. For example,
Because we all know when Big Pharma tells us that it's promising and tells us that, you know, it's really good and it's really safe and it won't cause addiction, they're usually 100% accurate, right? That's what we've found over the years, right? We don't even need the FDA to oversee anything or do their own research. We just need to trust the science and trust the big pharma executives that are telling us that it's safe and it won't cause cancer and it won't kill you. And But don't worry, because if you do get cancer, we have like a $10 million treatment that can make you live for a couple more years. Just trust the science. Trust the science.
Just this past week, at our annual meeting, researchers shared the results of a trial that shows melanoma patients who receive a cancer-fighting mRNA vaccine, in addition to immunotherapy, had better cancer outcomes than patients who received the immunotherapy alone. Additional research led by investigators at MD Anderson found that patients who received the COVID vaccine along with immunotherapy to treat non-small cell lung cancer had better cancer outcomes than those who were not vaccinated. Existing research provides strong indications that mRNA vaccines will likely join approved immunotherapies as new options for patients with cancer facing difficult diagnoses. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on these important issues. ASCO remains deeply committed to advancing safe, evidence-based care for all patients, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Gralow. Our last witness is Ms. Tamika Felder. Ms. Felder is a cancer survivor, award-winning women's health advocate, author, filmmaker, and the founder of Chief Visionary Officer at Survivor. Just Survivor. You spell it different. I get it, though. Survivor, Inc., a nonprofit that specializes in cervical cancer and advocacy and support. She currently serves as a co-chair on the National HPV Vaccination Roundtable and is appointed by President Biden to be a member of the National Cancer Advisory Board. Ms. Felder.
Thank you so much to you, the chair, the ranking member, and to all of you here for having me, and especially for including the patient voice. My name is Tamika Felder, a 25-year cervical cancer survivor. Today, I speak to the safety and importance of vaccines for all people and to advocate for the open and accurate sharing of scientific information so that families and communities can protect themselves and future generations. I was diagnosed in 2001 at the age of 25 while working here in Washington, D.C. as a broadcast journalist. The disease forced me to confront the fragility of health, and I endured a hysterectomy, chemotherapy, and radiation, which ultimately led to the loss of my fertility. Today, as a survivor and patient advocate, I have dedicated my work to education, empowerment, and ensuring that every person has accurate access to health, medical information, trusted health care, and life-saving prevention tools. I also firmly believe that the HPV vaccine, which would have offered protection against the HPV types most commonly associated with cervical cancer, could have changed the trajectory of my life. The human cost of cervical cancer remains a preventable disease for most people when prevention and screening are accessible and effectually utilized. Too many lives are cut short by this disease. June is National Cancer Survivorship Month, and I'm one of the 18.6 million cancer survivors in the U.S. But I also want to recognize, honor, and mourn the individuals whose lives were also lost to cervical cancer, including Tiolita Rickenbacker of Georgia, Jennifer Myers of Pennsylvania, Erica Fraser Stum of Indiana, and Becky Wallace of California. These are just a few in the United States, an estimated over 600,000 people who projected to die from cancer. This translates to about 1,700 deaths per day, making cancer the second leading cause of death in this country. Each of these women were more than a diagnosis. They were mothers, sisters, friends, and contributors to their communities. Their stories remind us why prevention, vaccination where appropriate, and continued research are essential to save others from needless suffering and loss. While other countries are nearing cervical cancer elimination, the United States is still behind, despite having the tools needed for elimination. Vaccines approved for the use in the United States undergo rigorous multi-phase testing for safety and efficacy before they are licensed. The overwhelming majority of vaccines have favorable safety profiles and the benefits, reduction of infectious disease, prevention of severe illness and death, and protection of vulnerable populations greatly outweigh the risk of rare adverse events. Vaccines are not just about one disease. They are about a standard approach to preventing contagious and deadly illnesses. The safety frameworks apply to vaccines across the board, routine immunizations for children, adults, and special populations. Cancer prevention vaccines like the HPV vaccines, influenza vaccines, and vaccines for other preventable diseases. Science provides the best available evidence and the safety and
Trust the
effectiveness
science.
of vaccines.
She's a
We
living
rely on
proof.
rigorous research, transparent reporting, and peer-reviewed findings is essential to protect public health. In an era of rapid information exchange, we must commit to sharing factual, science-based information. Misinformation and fear-mongering about vaccines undermine
I swear, like misinformation, that's like my Zoolander trigger word, guys. It really boils my blood.
trust, delay or prevent vaccination, and leave people vulnerable to preventable diseases. Public health communication should be clear, compassionate, and inclusive. It should acknowledge concerns, provide transparent explanations of benefits and risks, and connect people with trusted healthcare providers who can answer questions and offer guidance. Survivors and patients must be at the center of conversations about vaccines and cancer prevention. We bring lived experiences with disease, treatment, and survivorship, perspective that matters when designing education, outreach, and clinical guidance. As a cervical cancer survivor and advocate, I see both the devastating toll of cancer and the profound promise of prevention. Vaccines, including the HPV vaccine, are powerful tools when used alongside screening and treatment. We can reduce the burden. I want to thank you all for the opportunity to testify. I am grateful for your consideration of policies that protect communities today and for generations to come. And as Lindsay Gillette Lee reminded me yesterday, she's a 3-year cervical cancer survivor from North Carolina. May our stories pave the way so others don't have the same stories. As much as our stories matter, so do the science. Respectfully, Tamika Felder, founder of Survivor and 25-year cervical cancer survivor.
Thank you, Ms. Felder.
So I want to share a story with you guys. So this was, I don't know, close to over 12 years ago, because Dave and I are celebrating our 12th anniversary this summer. But at the time when Dave and I had just gotten engaged, I was working for a medical aesthetic company. And at the time, I was a medical esthetician also. And that company, they sent me to like this, I think it was like a weekend long. It was a certification class for me to become certified as an oncology medical esthetician. So I still have that certification. I'm a licensed, what is it called? A oncology medical esthetician, I think is the certification. But anyways, so at the time I was engaged to Dave, and I think I just found out I was pregnant at the time too, but that's another story. But during that course, the first day, we learned all about the different treatments that people go through when they have cancer, radiation, chemotherapy, and the purpose of it was to help us understand what these treatments are and how they affected the skin. So it was very like a long day. We didn't have many breaks. We're there in the morning all the way to the evening. And I remember the night of the end of the first night, I called Dave and I was like, I got to tell you, I love you. And, but I just have to let you know that after going through this certification, if I got cancer, I don't think I would do any of these treatments. Like, they really sound horrible. I don't think I would want to go through that. I don't think I would put myself through that. Like, I wouldn't give up, but, send me to like the rainforest or pump me through like with stem cells or whatever. But if I ever got diagnosed with cancer, I don't think I would do the traditional cancer treatments. And I made that decision, like I said, about over 12 years ago. And I stand by that. I don't think that if I ever got cancer, knock on wood, I hope that never happens to me, but I just don't see myself doing those treatments. And actually, what I did for myself a few years ago when that family friend I told you about got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer at age 31, I searched and I found a particular life insurance policy that it's a term policy. I think this is like one of the only companies that has this certain type of policy, but it has what's called living benefits. And the particular living benefits pay me directly a benefit while I'm still living if I got diagnosed with cancer or had a heart attack, stroke, or, had an accident and was disabled. I would be able to, I believe, pull up to like $1 million out of that policy upon that diagnosis. And that was really important to me because if I ever got diagnosed with a critical or a terminal illness, I want to be able to take control of, my own health plan. I don't even know if I would stay in the US. Maybe I would travel, to another country to get treatment. But I have that policy, not so much for the death benefit. Yeah, that's great. But I have that particular policy because I want that $1 million cash to use on these alternative treatments because I believe that those would work so much better than the cancer treatments that we have here in the US. Now, I'm not a medical professional, like I'm a certified oncology esthetician, but I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse. Don't listen to me for medical advice. I'm just sharing, my own personal story and my opinions. Everybody's journey is unique, and you really have to take care of your own body. That, I think, is the most important thing. You know your body best. And I think a lot of us realized this during COVID also when we had time during the lockdowns to just sit and research and, connect with ourselves again. The days of us just going to the doctor and just trusting them blindly, for a lot of us are over. Because COVID exposed that these doctors, they don't necessarily have like our best interests in mind. They're telling us to do these certain protocols that are not tested and people are having side effects because of it. But you have to learn to connect with yourself and do what you think is best for your body. Because even with the greatest doctor out there, at the end of the day, you know your body best. This is your body. And you have that vested interest to keep yourself alive and happy and healthy. Your doctor can help assist you, but they're not gods. And I think a lot of us felt like the medical profession wanted us to just worship them like they are gods during COVID and not question anything and just trust the science. But again, those days are over, and we need to make sure that they're over by sharing this information and speaking up for what we know is the right thing to do.
I think it's probably safe to say people on the panel, probably most people in this room, including myself, I mean, we don't dispute the fact that vaccines can be helpful and save lives. I think you can dispute some of the claims, but again, I've never been an anti-vaxxer. I think our concern here, and one of the reasons I hold this hearings, is there's just a denial of the vaccine and the injection injuries. I'll just, again, you had cervical cancer. We had it at our Voice of the Vaccine Injured, a mother, Emily Tarso, whose daughter, 20-year-old daughter, died 18 days after she received her third shot of Gardasil, the HPV vaccine. After 8 years of litigation, this is how difficult it is to actually claim compensation through the government fund. Quote, HHS conceded by preponderance of the evidence, including challenge, re-challenge, that her daughter died from her HPV vaccination. They had no alternative explanation for her death. So again, I'm not a vaccine denier. We're battling vaccine injury deniers.
Vaccine denier,
but,
oh my gosh.
Dr. Gralow, you mentioned that mRNA degrades very rapidly in the body. Is it your understanding and belief that the mRNA in the COVID injections is that type of mRNA?
That is my understanding.
So you don't realize that that's not true mRNA, it's modified. It's modified, pseudouridine, is that the, so it doesn't degrade. You're obviously then unaware of some of the studies that show that the spike is in the mRNA is circulating in the body up to 2 years. We haven't studied it longer than that, but it's stayed in this body that long. attaching to the cells. As long as I'm on this track, was it your belief that the injection would stay in the arm? We were told that. It was going to inject in the arm, stay there, create antibodies. The mRNA was going to degrade very quickly, and that's why it was so safe. Was that your understanding, and your belief that the injection stays in the arm?
I think the effects of the injection are total body. So the immune response, the reaction.
No, but I mean the actual. So you're aware the modified mRNA was encapsulated in a lipid nanoparticle, correct? So do you believe that package stayed in the arm as we were told it was going to do?
I can't reliably comment on
So
that.
So again, you're saying how safe and effective this is, but you don't know how it works.
I do know how it works. It incites an immune reaction, as vaccines do.
Okay, how does it incite that immune reaction? What does
By-
it do? What does it actually do?
It brings the immune cells to recognize the COVID protein.
How does it have the... Are you aware of the fact that the lipid nanoparticle delivers its modified mRNA to a cell? That modified mRNA is injected into the cell, and then it turns the cell into a factory of the spike protein, which is toxic to the body. Are you aware that that's how it creates immunity?
The mRNA in the vaccine does get into cells, and it codes for a protein once it is inside the cell.
So are you aware of the DNA contamination
I am
found
not-
in these vials, that if the mRNA is being injected in the cell, well, gee, maybe some of this DNA, which is way beyond the levels accepted by the FDA, could also be injected in the cell. Are you aware of that?
I am aware that the mRNA that is injected does not get into our own DNA, and I am not aware of reliable data saying that within the vaccine itself that the DNA levels are
So
high.
you said that there is no clinical evidence proving these injections cause cancer. What would you require for proof? How would you ever prove that?
I believe that we can put some boundaries around how much of an effect could be happening with respect to causing or accelerating cancer, because we have not seen an overall increase in cancer rates in the vaccinated U.S. population.
Okay. So that's a good place to start. Sorry, I was talking. I didn't realize my mic was off. But anyways, I'm pretty sure that she's not telling the truth. That's pretty clear. But this hearing, I think, is a little over 3 hours, and we've been here for about 2. So we're going to take a break. It's after 11:30 on the East Coast, and I hope everybody had a great time joining me, helping me get my steps in. I actually got in 10,000 steps while I was streaming. So thank you guys for joining me on my walk and watch with you. So I will see you guys tomorrow. If you guys do want me to send you a sample of that peptide guide that will be published next month, just put your email either in the comments or in the chat, and I will get that out to you. And I hope everybody has a great night. Thanks for joining me.